the Red Etin. There were once twa widows that lived on a small bit of ground which they rented from a farmer. Ane of them had twa sons, and the other had ane. And by it was time for the wife that had twa sons to send them away to seek their fortune. So she told her eldest son ae day to take a can and bring her water from the well, that she might bake a cake for him. And however much or however little water he might bring, the cake would be a great or small accordingly, and that cake was to be all that she could gie him when he went on his travels. The lad gaed away with the can to the well, and filled it with water, and then came hame again. But the can being broken, the maist part of the water had run out before he got back, so his cake was very small. Yet small as it was, his mother asked if he was willing to take the half of it with her blessing, telling him that if he chose rather to have the hale, he would only get it wi' a curse. The young man, thinking he might hae to travel a far way, and not knowing when or how he might get other provisions, said he would like to hae the hale cake, come of his mother's malison what like. So she gave him the hale cake and her malison alang wit. Then he took his brither aside and gave him a knife to keep till he should come back, desiring him to look at it every morning, and as lang as it continued to be clear, then he might be sure that the owner of it was well. But if it grew dim and rusty, then for certain some ill had befallen him. So the young man set out to seek his fortune, and he gaed a' that day, and a' the next day, and on the third day, in the afternoon, he came up to where a shepherd was sitting with a flock of sheep. And he gaed up to the shepherd and asked him what the sheep belanged to, and the man answered, "The Red Etin of Ireland once lived in Bellygan, and stole King Malcolm's daughter, the king of fair Scotland. He beats her, he binds her, he lays her on a band, and every day he dings her with a bright silver wand. Like Julian the Roman, he's one that fears no man. It's said there's ane predestinate to be his mortal foe, but that man is yet unborn, and lang may it be so." The young man then went on his journey, and he had not gone far when he espied an old man with white locks herding a flock of swine. And he gaed up to him and asked whose swine these were, when the man answered, "The Red Etin of Ireland once lived in Bellygan, and stole King Malcolm's daughter, the king of fair Scotland. He beats her, he binds her, he lays her on a band, and every day he dings her with a bright silver wand. Like Julian the Roman, he's one that fears no man. It's said there's ane predestinate to be his mortal foe, but that man is yet unborn, and lang may it be so." Then the young man gaed on a bit further, and came to another very old man herding goats, and when he asked whose goats they were, the answer was, "The Red Etin of Ireland once lived in Bellygan, and stole King Malcolm's daughter, the king of fair Scotland. He beats her, he binds her, he lays her on a band, and every day he dings her with a bright silver wand. Like Julian the Roman, he's one that fears no man. It's said there's ane predestinate to be his mortal foe, but that man is yet unborn, and lang may it be so." This old man also told him to beware of the next beasts that he should meet, for they were of a very different kind from any he had yet seen. So the young man went on, and by he saw a multitude of very dreadful beasts, ilk ane of them with twa heads, and on every head 4 horns. And he was sore frightened, and ran away from them as fast as he could, and glad was he when he came to a castle that stood on a hillock, with a door standing wide to the wall. And he gaed into the castle for shelter, and there he saw an auld wife sitting beside the kitchen fire. He asked the wife if he might stay there for the night, as he was tired wi' a lang journey, and the wife said he might, but it was not a good place for him to be in, as it belonged to the Red Etin, who was a very terrible beast with 3 heads that spared no living man he could get hold of. The young man would have gone away, but he was afraid of the beasts on the outside of the castle, so he beseeched the old woman to conceal him as well as she could, and not to tell the Etin that he was there. He thought if he could put over the night he might get away in the morning without meeting with the beasts, and so escape. But he had not been long in his hidey-hole before the awful Etin came in, and nae sooner was he in than he was heard crying, "Snauk butt and snauk bane, I find the smell of an earthly man. Be he living or be he dead, his heart this night shall kitchen my bread." The monster soon found the poor young man, and pulled him from his hole, and when he had got him out he told him that if he could answer him 3 questions his life should be spared. The first was, whether Ireland or Scotland was first inhabited. The second was, whether man was made for woman, or woman for man. The third was, whether men or brutes were made first. The lad not being able to answer one of these questions, the Red Etin took a mace and knocked him on the head, and turned him into a pillar of stone. On the morning after this happened, the younger brother took out the knife to look at it, and he was grieved to find it brown with rust. He told his mother that the time was now come for him to go away upon his travels also. So she requested him to take the can to the well for water, that she might bake a cake for him. The can being broken, he brought home as little water as the other had done, and the cake was as little. She asked whether he would have the hale cake wi' her malison, or the half wi' her blessing, and like his brother he thought it best to have the hale cake, come o' the malison what might. So he gaed away, and everything happened to him that had happened to his brother. The other widow and her son heard of all that had happened frae a fairy, and the young man determined that he would go also upon his travels, and see if he could do anything to relieve his 2 friends. So his mother gave him a can to go to the well, and bring home water, that she might bake him a cake for his journey. And he gaed. And as he was bringing him the water, a raven o'er abune his head cried him to look, and he would see that the water was running out. And he was a young man of sense, and seeing the water running out, he took some clay and patched up the holes, so that he brought home enough water to bake a large cake. When his mother put it to him to take the half cake wi' her blessing, he took it in preference to having the hale with her malison, and yet the half was bigger than what the other lads had got altogether. So he gaed away on his journey, and after he had travelled a far way he met with an old woman that asked him if he would give her a bit of his bannock, and he said he would gladly do that, and so he gave her a piece of the bannock, and for that she gied him a magical wand, that she said might yet be of service to him if he took care to use it rightly. Then the old woman, who was a fairy, told him a great deal that would happen to him, and what he ought to do in all circumstances, and after that she vanished in an instant out of his sight. He gaed on a great way further, and then he came up to the old man herding the sheep, and when he asked whose sheep these were, the answer was, "The Red Etin of Ireland once lived in Belaghan, and stole King Malcolm's daughter, the king of fair Scotland. He beats her, he binds her, he lays her on a band, and every day he dings her with a bright silver wand. Like Julian the Roman, he's one that fears no man. But now I fear his end is near, and destiny at hand, and you're to be, I plainly see, the heir of all his land." The young man then went on his journey, and he had not gone far when he espied an old man with white locks herding a flock of swine, and he gaed up to him and asked whose swine these were. When the man answered, "The Red Etin of Ireland once lived in Belaghan, and stole King Malcolm's daughter, the king of fair Scotland. He beats her, he binds her, he lays her on a band, and every day he dings her with a white silver wand. Like Julian the Roman, he's one that fears no man. But now I fear his end is near, and destiny at hand, and you're to be, I plainly see, the heir of all his land." Then the young man gaed on a bit further, and came to the very old man herding goats, and he asked whose goats they were, and the answer was, "The Red Etin of Ireland, ance lived in Bellygan, and stole King Malcolm's daughter, the King of fair Scotland. He beats her, he binds her, he lays her on a band, and every day he dings her with a bright silver wand. Like Julian the Roman, he's one that fears no man. But now I fear his end is near, and destiny at hand, and you're to be, I plainly see, the heir of all his land." This old man also told him to beware of the next beasts that he should meet, for they were of a very different kind from any he had yet seen. When he came to the place where the monstrous beasts were standing, he did not stop nor run away, but went boldly through among them. One came up roaring with open mouth to devour him, when he struck it with his wand and laid it in an instant dead at his feet. He soon came to the Etin's castle, where he knocked and was admitted. The old woman that sat by the fire warned him of the terrible Etin and what had been the fate of his twa brothers, but he was not to be daunted. The monster soon came in, saying, "Snouk butt and the snouk bane, I find the smell of an earthly man. Be he living or be he dead, his heart shall be kitchen to my bread." He quickly espied the young man, and bade him come forth on the floor, and then he put the 3 questions to him. But the young man had been told everything by the good fairy, so he was able to answer all the questions. When the Etin found this, he knew that his power was gone. The young man then took up the axe and hewed off the monster's 3 heads. He next asked the old woman to show him where the king's daughters lay, and the old woman took him upstairs and opened a great many doors, and out of every door came a beautiful lady who had been imprisoned there by the Etin. And one of the ladies was the king's daughter. She also took him down into a low room, and there stood 2 stone pillars that he had only to touch with his wand, when his 2 friends and neighbors started into life. And the hale of the prisoners were overjoyed at their deliverance, which they all acknowledged to be owing to the prudent young man. Next day they all set out for the king's court, and a gallant company they made, and the king married his daughter to the young man that had delivered her, and gave a noble's daughter to ilk ane of the other young men, and so they all lived happily all the rest of their days. End of the Red Etin.